Okay, we've got two halves to the agenda today. I feel that as the sector delivering Kickstart, we're coming a long way now. We have a logical split between gateway organisations and organisations that are acting as employers. So we're going to reflect that on the agenda today. I think we're at the point where we should start sharing our good news stories, but also we're very grateful again to have Nick Riddle from the DWP with us, who will answer questions. And I just want to say thanks to Nick again, because this has been a tremendous resource for us. We've all been on a very steep learning curve with Kickstart, and we've been on that journey with our colleagues at the DWP, and I think we've come a long way together. So really pleased to have Nick with us, and he will take questions. But if we could start with, we're going to have a presentation on the stewardship of Kickstart and the approach in Greater Manchester. So I think if we ask Greater Manchester Combined Authority to start with that, we will then look at some changes and updates to the scheme to reflect the national and local lockdown restrictions. And then we can open it up for some more success stories and a Q&A about the gateway sessions. But can I go over to you, Anna and Matt, first, please? Thank you.
Matt, do you want to start?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Elizabeth, thanks for inviting us today.
Thanks for coming along.
I must admit, I think I found this forum to be fantastic, both in terms of what happens actually during the meeting itself, but also just the amount of useful information that's going into the chat afterwards. It really feels like a community of practice now, which is great. So I just want to give a bit of an overview in terms of where Kickstart fits strategically with in Greater Manchester. Some of our kind of role and ambitions for the programme. And some of the things we've put in place to try and make sure that it delivers those ambitions, and then Anna will talk through some of the kind of the real kind of practicalities of the things that are working, some of the progress to make, and also probably some of the constraints and some of the things we're still working through, because as Elizabeth kind of said at the beginning, it's still very much a work in progress. But just in terms of kind of strategic progress, so Kickstart is one part of an existing and incredibly important young people's offer within Greater Manchester. So part of our Andy Burnham's mayoral priorities was around developing a young person's guarantee, and a task force has been established to deliver that, which is chaired by an esteemed Olympian Diane Madal, and Kickstart is a key element of that guarantee in terms of its ability to address and improve economic resilience for young people. So it's really good that as part of this kind of really high priority mayorally led piece of work, Kickstart is front and centre as one of the vehicles to address it, and it's been, and because that guarantee has been co-produced with young people, it's been really positive to see young people talk about the value they see in terms of finding work, in terms of supported work, which and the opportunities through things like through Kickstart, which is fantastic. And I suppose in terms of our kind of strategic messages, you know, we're keen to ensure and committed to ensure that that Kickstart is steered by and works for the benefit of Greater Manchester businesses, who are key kind of stakeholders in this. And as importantly, that our young people deserve quality jobs and access to support and training that helps them convert Kickstart placements into long-term employment. And there are a number of things which we've put in place to try and enable that. So we've established a GM Kickstart board, which is chaired by our local enterprise partnership chair. Has got representation from our chambers of commerce, from learning providers, Elizabeth from URSA, DWP, Job Centre Plus, local authorities. So trying to ensure we've got both businesses, training providers, national think tanks, and other kind of learning providers and stakeholders that can genuinely come together in a coordinated manner to make this programme a success. And the board's acting as a key enabler. So supporting employers to understand what good looks like, for example, working with partners to maximise existing assets and resources as part of that kind of wraparound offer, and having oversight over programme outcomes. And I must admit that oversight of programme outcomes and a quality offer is something we're investing a lot of time in, and I'm sure we'll pick it up with Nick, and we've raised it at our local board just how important that kind of management information for the programme is for us to help both drive take up of the programme, but also to ensure that it's delivering what we want. Job Centre Plus is a key part of that group, and employers and gateway organisations who are genuinely kind of feeding in that their experiences of the programme to date, how they think it could best work, but also some of the kind of teething problems that they may have had, and also some of the really good things that they're enabling and seeing through the programme. So just before I hand over to Anna, so we want to ensure that kind of principles of delivery for this programme. I'm getting quite a lot of feedback there, so I don't know whether somebody's just unmuted themselves. But so we want to kind of ensure that we genuinely achieve the maximum number of placements and jobs created in Greater Manchester as possible. And as somebody who's a little bit competitive, and it's where the kind of national data is really important, I want to ensure that Greater Manchester residents are getting at least their fair share of the national part, if not more. And it's amazing just how much, if there is that kind of comparative data available, how much it can drive local partners to kind of go that extra mile. So another plea for that to happen. So we've got the kind of real focus on ensuring there's quality and meaningful experience for young people and employers. We're absolutely using our networks and the board to promote equality of access through diverse and inclusive workplaces, looking at how we can share best practice around advocating good employment practices, and also ensuring that young people through our board are connected into businesses, the broader kind of education, skills and employment offer, and how we kind of maximise the resources that are available. So the board is quite new. There's lots of energy around this programme. There's a real desire to make it work, and a real appetite to build on it, but also not just the programme itself, but also ensuring that there are clear pathways from Kickstart into other things, so that this is part of a sustainable programme and approach for our young people and for businesses. So I know there've been some teething problems, but it's great to see, and great through this fund to see so much work going on behind the scenes to make things smoother, and increasing eligibility in terms of which businesses can make use of it, and things like gateway direct as approaches. So we're fully committed to make it work. And I've got to be honest, the main work in terms of providing that stewardship on the ground is not done by me, and it's not necessarily done at that board, but it's done by a kind of core group of people that Anna absolutely kind of leads and brings together with Job Centre Plus through a kind of project team on the ground to genuinely drive some of those changes on the ground outside of that kind of cycle of monthly board meetings. I'm going to hand over to Anna to talk through some of the kind of practical things, and probably some of the practical challenges as well that we and she particularly is facing with the team. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Twelsdon, Principal Manager for Employment at GMCA. So as Matt says, as well as the board, we've got a project group that sits alongside it. And the membership of that group is colleagues from GMCA alongside colleagues from the DWP in Greater Manchester. So we're really fortunate in having that strong working relationship. And we've actually got Ian Ogden, who's now the Kickstart account manager for JCP and GM on that group. Before that, we had Nina Choffey, who held that role. And Ian, I'm not just saying that because I can see you're on the call, but it's really important that we work together on this. So in terms of the work, Obviously, one of the things we do is we organise the board. And thinking back in September when Kickstart was launched, we kind of followed Ursa's lead and we held a webinar, and we were really fortunate to have Grant Williams from the national team on that group. So that was a really helpful sort of starting point for us. But since then, we've sort of tried to evolve and think about what can we do, what kind of work can we sort of take forward to try and have an impact and understand the scheme better. So one of the things that we've done recently is we've created a data dashboard around jobs in the pipeline in GM. So what this covers is our colleagues from JCP and GM are giving us information on what's happening on the ground there. So we're getting data on the vacancies in Greater Manchester, the referrals they're making, applications by young people, and then job starts by young people, and we're keeping this as a sort of rolling profile. We do know that our colleagues are also looking at attrition rates now as well, so dropouts from the jobs, for example, as one of the things that they're seeking to understand better. Because there isn't currently national management information on the scheme, we also thought about what else we could do. So we've got some information from members of the board who are gateways and our local authority and community and voluntary sector partners around jobs in the pipeline. So again, this is a few different pieces of data, and we're not attributing it to specific gateways. We're kind of lumping the data together, but we're getting information on kind of the numbers of jobs that are being proposed by employers, what's then going through to an application and being submitted, what's then being approved by DWP, and then we're looking at kind of when these are live for recruitment with JCP. And we've only just started this, and kind of the last bit of data that we've done suggests that there could be as many as sort of 1,600 jobs in the pipeline in GM that haven't yet either reached the point of application or been approved. Obviously, lots of caveats there, but it's a good number. It's a healthy number, so we're quite optimistic. We also want to understand a little bit more about the sort of the new caseload of young people on universal credit in JCP and GM. So our colleagues in JCP are doing a piece of work so it's a youth casework sampling exercise to try and understand a little bit more about the characteristics and needs of young people in Greater Manchester, and that's starting this week. And that will help us inform, I guess, not only understand where Kickstart fits, but where other programmes fit and what else it is that we need to do, because we're hearing anecdotally that caseload has changed as a result of COVID, so the offer probably needs to be quite diverse. We're looking at some actions around comms, enhancing what the DWP is doing nationally. So we've heard things like people saying they're not quite sure what happens in JCP around the job matching process, the referral process. So we're trying to describe that a bit more clearly. And also we wanted to do a piece that was kind of around helping employers choose the right gateway for them, knowing that that there are different options there, and we kind of had something ready, and then the Gateway Direct model came along, so we're just pausing that at the moment, and our plan is that we'll use the Greater Manchester LEP website to host that sort of information. As time passes, we hope to be able to share case studies and good practice as well. As an organisation, we're looking at whether we're hoping to employ some young people through the Kickstart scheme, as are many of our public sector partners, and we've got a collaboration group that's local authorities that I coordinate, that's meeting monthly at the moment, and we're just sharing ideas, challenges. We've got kind of a Teams channel where people can post questions and share things if they want to. Just on that point, I will mention, just because I know we've got members of the national team here, that one of the things that we're looking at as an organisation is we want to pay the real living wage, and in fact we want our jobs to fit with the local government Green Book pay scales, but the terms and conditions for Kickstart say something about not using other Crown funding for the scheme. I know why that's there. I know it's quite a complex scenario, but it is something that possibly needs ironing out for the public sector. And then I guess finally, we do link back to the Young Persons Guarantee work that Matt mentioned. So some of that includes listening to the voices of young people, and it will be no surprise that young people and indeed employers have said they want to have a better picture of what the offer as a whole is for young people in Greater Manchester. So we're trying to tackle that, but it's not directly our group doing that. That sort of work happening with the Young Persons Guarantee. So I guess that's just an overview of some of the things we're doing. We think that the work will evolve over time. But it is really helpful working with JCP so directly, and also all the other partners who sit on the group who, you know, as much as anything are there to share and learn from one another. Matt, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to that at all.
No, that's it. And as you say, we'll just evolve this over time. And I think there's been a real focus in the kind of short term in terms of generating jobs, generating information. I think we'll be turning our focus pretty quickly, and perhaps more so in terms of and what's the sustainability of Kickstart, what's happening to those young people, and how can we ensure that it's genuinely improving their lives for the better. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Matt and Anna. Before we move on, I just want to check, has anybody got any questions about the GM Gateway stewardship and the model of what's taking place there? If we do the hand raising, would be the way to do that. Okay, I don't see any hands. It's always this delay on Teams that's oh, I do see a hand now. Makes me a bit nervous when I say it's not happening. Darius, do you want to open your microphone and speak?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, thank you both for sharing. It was really helpful. Matthew, you talked about the numbers side of things. I think so. You know, so as you said, it's a good focus to get a sense of what's happening. Are you able to share a little bit in terms of kind of numbers, either how many gateways you're working with, or overall volumes, or kind of sense of where you are from that side, or is that feeling sensitive to share?
No, it's not particularly sensitive to share. There's just a caveat in terms of how accurate some of the data. So some of it is anecdotal. So the latest information I had this morning from Job Centre Plus was that there were just shy of 2,000 jobs now live in Greater Manchester for work coaches to refer to. So that's updated even since Anna spoke only 10 minutes ago. So which is really good. And a lot of it is, so there's a couple of things we're trying to understand. So although we did some work looking at, so what is the overall volume, the scale of Kickstart, and therefore what do we think our ambition should be in Greater Manchester, which is different to what is DWP having a target for Greater Manchester. But our ambition is we would expect to see in the region of 17,000 jobs being created through Kickstart in Greater Manchester. So that's our kind of initial focus. If we were to get our kind of fair share of the £2 billion or £2.1 billion worth of funding, and that's a good challenge for us to set with businesses locally. However, we also, our businesses and our kind of Chamber of Commerce and our LEP are always keen to say, well, what's happening in Liverpool City region, what's happening in Sheffield, what's happening in London? Are we doing better, worse, as well as are there some areas we can focus on? Are there some sectors that have done really well in other areas? And it's that type of information I think will be really good for us to really kind of put some challenge back into the system. But we have had information back from, I think, in the region of 20 gateway organisations who identified the businesses that they've engaged with. Not named them, but the kind of the volume of jobs which have been earmarked for Kickstart, which is around the 1,600 or so, and those that have been then sent into DWP, perhaps awaiting approval, those that have been approved by DWP, and some of that is about understanding, well, what's our pipeline? Are we on track to meet our ambition? Is there more we can do? But it's also helpful to understand, are there any kind of pain points in that process, any kind of key blockers? So there's work underway, but I suppose my challenge is if 16,000 jobs was a kind of a fair share for Greater Manchester, that should be the minimum we should be aiming for. We want to support as many young people as possible through quality jobs, and the kind of focus is not just the number, but that they are real quality jobs. Thank you, appreciate that.
Okay, great. I can see that Ian Ogden has his hand raised from DWP in Manchester. Do you want to come in, Ian?
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you for that. Just to help Matt out, really, with the numbers, just because we tend to be a little bit more up to date than the guys at GMCA. We've currently got 31 gateways that have been approved across GM as of this morning, and we're at 21 employers. So With regards to obviously the approvals coming through, that's really great. We're seeing a consistent number coming through on a daily basis, which in turn with that obviously brings vacancies. Just to clarify on the vacancies, absolutely right. We've got just shy of 2,000 in the pipeline. They're not live at this present time, but we're expecting them to be going live over the next 6 to 8 weeks, which obviously will be some amazing opportunities for our young people. So yeah, just to support that conversation, really. Thank you.
Okay. So I can see that somebody's put in the chat that perhaps a future agenda item actually is about the progress with local authority Kickstart employment and Green Book terms and conditions. And I do wonder, as the Kickstart forum evolves, whether we should perhaps just have we can break into some rooms in the future and perhaps have a local authority focus, etc. And so I've made a note of that from the chat, and we'll keep that on the agenda. I'm having a little bit of difficulty seeing hands raised and the chat, but I think that Joanne Hainsworth and Andrew Fletcher have got the hands raised. So can we go Joanne and then Andrew? And I'll try and see who else is.
Hi Elizabeth, apologies, this is Jo Hainsworth. It was a mistake raising my hand.
All right, okay. Easily done. I've done it myself. Andrew, is yours a valid hand raised?
Unfortunately, it wasn't. I was trying to get the chat open. Well,
oh, right, okay. Okay, has anybody got the hand raised before we move on from this? Adam? And fortuity, the one that say Adam. Yeah.
Yes. Hi. So I work in the systems area of supporting providers to deliver this. You mentioned MI, quality assurance, data. Is there some kind of standardization and approach that you guys have identified to doing this? Have you any tools or solutions to get that?
I think the answer to that is probably no. I think what we've tried to do is take some action waiting for national MI. Obviously, we've got the information that Ian and colleagues share in GM, which is fantastic. But when we collected the information from gateways and also public sector and community and voluntary sector partners, we just sort of have to trust that's the live data that they know about. And then we just made sure that we weren't double counting people with those figures, because obviously some local authorities are also gateways. So we're doing the best that we can as a collective, really, to get a picture of what's happening.
Sure, that's really useful. Thanks. In terms of that employability wrap, I'm seeing massive variance in how that's being delivered as part of the programme. Some during the employment, some after, some maybe unplanned when it starts, and sort of moving from there. So when it comes to delivering that, you said you had maybe some idea of what good looks like from a quality perspective.
I think it's not an area that we've got onto yet as a group, and what we're very conscious of is that the DWP have sort of set the standards around the scheme. So actually one of the things we talked about previously in collaboration with sort of the Young Person's Guarantee work is something that was more about working with young people to sort of co-produce something around what they expect good to be like. So it's not something we've explored in any great detail yet, I'm afraid.
Okay, do you expect that might come out in some form of survey data, or?
Not sure yet, to be confirmed.
Right, no worries, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Good questions. And I've made a note of this because I think perhaps a future agenda item is to just really focus on the employability provision, on what good looks like and what we want to achieve for young people beyond Kickstart and beyond the opportunities we're creating. So, hands raised. Gavin, would you like to come in next?
Just further to what you're saying, Elizabeth, what does good look like? My interest really is around neurodiversity and what that looks like in practice through once you've delivered these programs. And as a researcher, I have developed a pathway, but that isn't clear as the system remains agile as to what that looks like and what outcomes and expectations are. So I think you're right in saying, what are the aims and objectives? Are we, what is, a lot of times past when we talk about social mobility, that youngsters ended up in jobs that really had no long-term qualifications or outcomes. And this has been an issue in my research and reflects in the Social Mobility Committee and Commission. And I have posted some of those reflections in the Gateway chat. So it's just an extension of what you're saying, and I think that conversation is valid long term.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. And I would refer to the things that Gavin has put in the ongoing Kickstart chat, which is a great resource. Richard Weston, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, the question for Ian Ogden, really. He mentioned that there's currently in GM 6 to 8 week delay period before vacancies go live. I mean, is this something we should be preparing our employers to expect on an ongoing basis, or is it just early sort of teething troubles?
Hi, Richard. Sorry, I probably didn't explain myself properly. It's not a delay as such, it's just they're in the pipeline. So when the vacancy template goes through to us in our central team, employers put a date that they want the closing date on, so we work to that. So it's pipeline vacancies that we know are coming through, not so much a delay with regards to vacancies coming through.
Right. So in terms of sort of general, sort of from submitting a vacancy to actually reaching the work coaches for referrals, how long should we be telling employers to expect to wait?
So at this moment in time, we're still just catching up a little bit with regards to the leave over Christmas. So at the moment, they're landing on the system within around about 8 working days. Once we get over that, which will be fairly soon, probably by the end of next week, to be fair, they're normally on the system within 3 or 4 days. So the 48-hour notice, which I think it was Anna who touched on, we receive 48-hour notice to say a vacancy is going on, which allows us then to just be prepared for our work coaches to start having early dialogue with the young people. And then a couple of days following that, the vacancy is then landing on the system for us to refer to.
Thanks, Ian.
Okay. Maybe we could pick this up when we've got Nick Riddle online with us. He's on in the meeting, but just to talk about those timescales and what people can expect for approvals. Hands raised. I'm having real difficulty with the hand raising this morning, seeing who it is. But if you've got your hand raised, do you want to just take your chance and open your microphone and come in, please? No, I think we may have exhausted that. Right. Well, oh no, here we go. Adrian Butcher.
Sorry, I was just switching on my mic. Yeah, in terms of therefore jobs being accepted and candidates being sent out, one thing we're offering to do, and they seem to want it for employers, is to screen applicants as well and actually better prepare them for interview. At the moment, the process seems to be that the JDs go straight out to employers. So we at the moment would, apart from the employers telling us, would have no way of actually tracking that. I wonder if within DWP there's a chance that they could say, actually, your vacancy has been approved and therefore it has gone out to a JCP, and therefore you know which JCP it's gone to, so you can, if necessary, speak to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that might be a question for Nick.
Okay.
In a moment. Yeah,
okay.
I'm hoping Nick has heard that and made a note of it, and we can bring Nick in shortly.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, but thanks for that, Adrian. Very valid. Anybody else got anything for Matt and Anna before we move on? No, thank you. Well, I'd like to thank Matt and Anna. I participate in the Greater Manchester Kickstart Board, and I find that really useful because it's really good to see what's happening at that combined authority level and to sort of have that in my mind when we're doing these events and when I'm talking to others in the Ursa Kickstart community. So it's been really good to have you with us this morning. Before we move on to the questions with Nick, which I know is really valuable to everybody. I just wanted to give any other attendees this morning who've got approved gateways, if you want to share with the group about your successes, where you're up to. Equally, if you don't want to do it this morning, we are going to ask people to do short presentations at future meetings just to keep building the community. But I can see Amy has raised a hand. Do you want to come in?
Yes, if that's okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, open your camera and yeah, great.
Well, can you see and hear me? Good start. I just wanted to say thank you. It's all so exciting. I've had a long history in public sector, but am now an SME myself, and put a speculative few social media shares out, but had just before Christmas, almost best ever Christmas present, other than my daughter being born, was that we got 141 jobs approved, which added up to £1,078,480.80. Now, I'm sure in the context of big local authorities, that's nothing. But for an SME gateway, if that makes sense, all working with the local pub, local companies, local friends, local charities, it's fabulous and exciting, and I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, including especially Nick Riddle, if he's listening, to say thank you for the opportunity and the letter I got from you just before Christmas. Fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Okay, so before we move on, have we got anybody else who'd like to tell us about their gateway success? I can see hands raising now. So if we have Arit next. No, I can't. Arit hasn't come in. So can we perhaps move to Andrew Waite?
No. Good morning. Hello. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hiya.
Hi, everyone. Yes, just to share some success, we have 51 jobs that were advertised with Job Centre Plus. So we submitted those prior to the festive break. And we've now got a local contact name who I spoke with yesterday. Absolutely lovely young lady who's really on the ball, switched on, and she's aware of our progress. So it's so nice and rewarding to have a local contact as well.
So, yeah, great. It's really good. After all the how's it going to work meetings, it's really good to be on the other side of the line now, isn't it? So I can see Arit's name's hand's still raised. Do you want to try and come in now?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was talking to myself. I was on mute. Yeah, we got our letter just before. Sorry, I'm from Diva Apprenticeship. So we work primarily in the entertainment industry, so film, TV, creative industries, as well as doing a lot of digital marketing. So we got our first approval for our cohort just before Christmas, which was great. And we're just waiting now to hear from our job centre contacts so we can start getting these jobs out. But it's super exciting, and we've got a whole new raft of companies coming forward. So yeah, really excited about it, very excited. Worth the drama, put it that way.
Okay, great. And I'm making notes of everybody who's telling us this so we can perhaps do some session later about how it's going. Janet, I can see your hand raised.
Yeah, we're a disability charity in Wiltshire, and we're acting as a gateway for organisations based in and around Hampshire, and we got our grant letter yesterday, so hot off the press. So yeah, really excited to get going, and yeah, echo what Arit said, the wait was worth it.
Okay, yeah, great stuff. And David Hinton.
Hi there. Good to see you as well, Arit. No surprise to hear you're making good stuff of it. We're like everyone, I think we were quite early to be approved, so we hit a lot of bumps in the road, but we've got about 70 or 80 vacancies out now. We've got interviews scheduled. We're hopefully going to get a job start in January, which will be extremely exciting. And just to really say, we're putting together a letter to the Chancellor to request an extension to the scheme, because I think all this great work that's going on really needs a little bit more time at the end based on some of the slowdowns that we've had. So I'll be sharing a link in the group if people want to sort of sign and contribute to that.
Okay, and that's really good to know, David. And once that's in the chat, we'll make sure that Ursa put that out in the weekly newsletter that goes, you know, we've got quite a big reach with that, over 3,000 recipients. It's not 3,000 organisations, it's 3,000 inboxes, but we'll certainly send that out and put our support behind that. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Peter.
Hi, morning, Elizabeth.
Hiya.
Just share some good news. Obviously, at the beginning of around about the 11th of December, we were approved for 887 vacancies. The majority of those, I'd say a good 85-90% has been vacancy templates has been sent over to DWP before Christmas and in the first week of January since we've been back. I've had news from employers who started to contact me in the last couple of days to let me know that they've been contacted by JCP to let them know the vacancies will be going live. So we're hoping to see the majority of the vacancies that we sent over to go live. In total, we've now hit over 1,700 vacancies with employers. We're just waiting on the outcome again from another couple of applications that we made to DWP from around the 11th of December up to the 23rd of December, waiting on the outcome on the rest of that. So, you know, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be well near about at least 1,500. I'm hoping for at least vacancies live that East Midlands Chamber has created with businesses, mainly across Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire and Leicestershire. But we have been contacted with businesses from as far north as Edinburgh and probably as far south as Bournemouth that's approached us to ask us to work as part, you know, as their preferred gateway. So yeah, just to let you know, it's all working. All the bumps, as everybody else has mentioned, you know, we're gladly over that and almost forgotten now. It's just now the exciting part for us is providing, you know, these, employment opportunities to those young people.
Okay.
And that's it, really.
Right, great stuff. If we take Heather and Stephanie, and then we'll move on to questions to Nick Riddle. Okay, Heather.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Heather Armstrong from London Learning Consortium, operating as a gateway. We're based in Croydon, but across London and the South East, our employers are working with us. I just wanted to feedback really how positive the employers have been about continuing to be able to offer these placements in lockdown, and I think that's been really good practice. They're pulling together. We're holding forum for our employers to get together and share good practice on a regular basis, and we're going to do that for our Kickstart young people as well, so that they can get together and share their experiences whilst they're on Kickstart. But I think it's to the credit of the employers. They've been really positive about making sure they're not delaying those placements at all, and making sure that they can still get those young people in and still offer them those opportunities right from the start. So I think it's something maybe to consider later on, perhaps as a discussion of sharing how employers are able to do that, so that the project isn't held up, maybe for a future meeting.
Okay, great. I've made a note of that as well. Okay, so thanks for that, Heather. So last hand raised, Stephanie Bishop.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's great to be part of the call and hear the enthusiasm about the programme. Yeah, really passionate about supporting young people into employment. So yeah, I'm from People in the Brilliance, the Kickstart Gateway, and we received our first approvals early December. So we've submitted in the job placement forms for around 30 roles. So yeah, keen to understand what the timescales are, because those roles haven't yet been made live with the JCP. So yeah, really keen to understand from Nick what those timescales are, and whether that's normal or whether that's going to be speeded up because there's been a bit of a backlog. But yeah, it's really exciting. So on Monday we received approval for another 430 roles. So it seems that the backlog of approvals is being cleared. So that's really fantastic. And we're helping employers with their recruitment, with quite an unusual recruitment process where we're starting the coaching in the recruitment process to really help individuals understand what their worth is and if they are well aligned to the roles through the recruitment process. And then we're helping employers also employers with the whole process to make it as smooth as possible. But also during the 6 months, we're providing a really fantastic scheme called Radical Employability to the individuals to help them with their employability support during the 6 months to help kind of pave the way for brighter futures. So yeah, we're all really excited and super happy about getting the approvals on Monday, but just keen to understand what the delay is and so we can start planning for the next stages.
Okay, great. So as always, we have Nick Riddle with us from the DWP, and I'm sure that people have questions for him. But Nick, we are moving on, and isn't it great to have this sort of positive results focus on the calls? But I think if you could give us any updates on timescales and the sort of the periods between different stages that people should expect, and then some updates about lockdowns, national and local, and how that might impact on Kickstart, and then we'll open it up to people to ask you some questions as usual, if that's okay.
Sure thing, will do, Elizabeth. And thank you for inviting me. And a good morning to everyone. I enjoy listening to everything that you were saying, and I particularly enjoyed genuinely listening to the enthusiasm and the fact that things seem to be going in the right direction. However, we do still have a few challenges. So what I am going to do is just give everyone, and Elizabeth, I think you wanted it to be kind of focused more on gateways. So I will talk predominantly about that, to be honest. So it might be a bit of a repeat if we've got gateways and employers on the call, but apologies for that. So just a couple of things I'm going to cover then before we perhaps have any questions, which I'm always very happy to take. So it was great to hear Anna, Matt and Ian, because I think that was the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about. So some of you will have known that in the past, when we've had queries and questions from URSA or URSA colleagues, or indeed any applicants or people interested, that predominantly they've been coming across the central team's desks, if that makes sense. Now, that is a fairly small central team. A lot of them have been coming my way, which is absolutely fine. But clearly, as the programme matures and as we go forward, we can't have a position where one fairly small central team gets loads and loads and loads of questions. And so we took a decision, I think it was certainly just before I think I came to you last time round as URSA, that we would establish a network of Kickstart district account managers, of which Ian is one. And it is really good to hear the news from Anna and Matt that relationship is really working. So that network is now fully established across the UK. So on that basis, every district will have someone there who can help you guys with questions or queries or advice. And that's really to reflect, and Elizabeth, I will talk a bit more about this, but that's to reflect as well the fact that we are and we continue to be in unprecedented times. And on that basis, it's good to have someone local on the ground for potential applicants or people that perhaps want to vary the grant agreement. And I will talk a bit about that. To talk to locally to get that bit of advice, because with the best will in the world, the central team is fairly small, but now we've got a small army of people out in Job Centre Plus land that can help you out. So particularly listening, I think, to what Ian, Anna and Matt were saying earlier, that relationship clearly seems to be working. So if you haven't got in touch with your local Kickstart district account manager, please do so, because they are there to help you and answer any questions that you might have. So that, I think, was my first sort of parish notice. And then I just want to cover, Elizabeth, if that's okay, a few more things just in terms of where we are with timescales now for getting through the work. Stephanie, you mentioned your experience, and in fact, I think you said, you know, is this kind of BAU, or are we in this space because of where we are with the backlog? And the answer is the latter, to be honest. But just before I come on to talk in a bit more detail about where we are numbers wise, and I think probably a few hints or tips for those of you that are gateways and contemplating varying the grant agreement, perhaps you're worried you haven't heard from us, just to give you some guidelines about where we think we are. I think, Elizabeth, I'd like to reflect on what you said as well. And it's a massive thank you from me and everyone at DWP for the incredible patience that everyone on this call and beyond has shown, because let's be honest, it has been a pretty tough few months. I remember, Elizabeth, when I first came to one of your URSA sessions, and whilst the tone was polite, there were a lot of questions, and I haven't had my hair cut especially short today just to kind of brazen that one out. But it's fair to say that we have had a lot of challenges along the way, and it's been a journey. And I want to say thank you to everyone for your patience and your collaboration, and the fact that I think we have genuinely worked together really well as a community to try to make this a success. And then I think the headlines are that in the main, we are where we want to be with gateway applications. So we are now in a space where we are in the main adhering to the service standards on gov.uk. So gateway applications are now more or less in a business as usual state. However, there are just a few things that I think I just want to say in case people are concerned. Now then, immediately before Christmas, and Stephanie, this will be why I think you might have had some of the challenges you got, we basically, if I'm being honest, we just wanted to get the gateway backlog completely cleared, because we're totally aware that actually, and Amy, you mentioned it, we wanted to give people a nice Christmas. We wanted to give people some good news before Christmas. We did not want this to drag into the new year because it had persisted for quite some period of time. So what that means is that if anybody on this call applied on or before the 9th of December to be a gateway organisation and you have not yet heard from DWP, and by heard, just to be clear, I don't mean someone friendly picking up the phone saying we've got your application. I mean we've contacted you to say your application has been rejected, and hopefully it won't be too many of those, or you should have received your grant agreement. If there's anybody on the call, as I say, who applied on or before the 9th that has not had a decision communicated to them with a grant agreement, we have missed you and there is an error. So I do want to be completely open and clear about that, because in amongst all the really good news stories, we have, we think, cleared that out completely. So what I will say is, notwithstanding the fact that we've got our really great Kickstart district account managers there, if you're sitting there thinking, hang on a minute, I applied on the 1st of December and I've not heard from DWP, then I would genuinely invite you to contact me direct, because we have had a problem there. Any applications after the 9th of December, we should be in a position where we get to around about a business as usual state within the next week to 10 days, I would say. So if you have applied after the 9th of December and you have not yet heard from us, you should expect to hear from us in or around about the next 10 days. And once we've done that, what that means is, and I think this is really good news, that entire backlog of gateway applications will be completely clear. And what we are now doing is we are now pivoting our central team into loading the vacancies, which clearly is the next and most really important part, because we have heard some really great stories. And Eric, we've chatted. It's great to see you on the call as well. And Peter, it was really great, I think, last time to see, you know, the number that you'd got through. What we now need to do is to make sure that we can get those vacancies loaded. So what we're doing at the moment is we're triaging the vacancies that we have currently with us, because we expect that some will not be able to be loaded for whatever reason, because the employer gateway may have changed their mind, or they just want to delay it for a little bit. So what we will be doing now is we will be prioritizing those vacancies that we know that we can load immediately, and hopefully get those through in good order. What I will say is that if you are a gateway organisation and you do not have your grant agreement yet, and you have applied after the 10th of December, it would be incredibly helpful for us if you do not submit any additional applications to us. And the reason for that is, Elizabeth, we talked about it before, I think, one of the reasons why some gateways were waiting a long period of time was that they'd submitted multiple applications into DWP, and that's not a criticism, that's the way the process was working, just to be completely clear, so I'm not having a dig in any way, shape or form. But the challenge that we then had is that if we then spotted those within the system, then we try to batch those together so we can consider the application in its entirety. So the reason I'm giving you, if you like, just that little tip is that wait until you get your grant agreement. When you get your grant agreement, then it's time to think about varying it. Now then, last time round, Elizabeth, we did talk about that process for varying the grant agreement, and I'm pretty sure that I said to you all that what we would be doing is that when we sent the grant agreement out, we would be sending the variation template with it. Now, we have not been doing that, and we've not been doing that predominantly because we think there's probably a better way of managing this, and the better way of managing it, we think, is to actually route this through our district Kickstart account managers. So from next week, your Kickstart district account managers should have the necessary documentation for you to vary your grant agreement. So what that should mean is, again, from next week, you should not need to put in additional applications through gov.uk to vary your grant agreement. Your Kickstart district account manager should be able to help you with that process. And the reason that we're doing that is, again, that just gives us, I think, that better feel on the ground for us to have that conversation, hopefully to do a bit of vetting in advance about the application to make sure it's in good order, but also to have that conversation about, are you ready to advertise these vacancies now? Do you want to wait a bit? All of these sorts of things. So good news then that process should be up and running next week. I know last time I said they'd come out with the grant agreements, and that wasn't an error, but literally we have thought about it and thought there's probably a better way of doing this rather than just sending it cold to an email address, because we can have that one-to-one contact. So Elizabeth, that was my little update. So I'm happy to take any questions.
I can't see hands raised, so I'm sure we will get questions. Can I just ask you one before we start? Is there a link to the district account managers that we could share so that people can look up who's the person to contact in their area?
There isn't, but I can easily
sorry.
get the list. I can easily
if
get
you send that in, we'll put that in the chat later. Great, yeah. Thanks, Nick. Sorry. Faye Thomas, I can see that your hand's raised. Do you want to ask a question?
Hi, Nick. Thanks very much. I hope everyone can hear me well enough. So I just want to clarify about the variation. So I can see that DWP have worked very, very hard to clear the backlog. We got our approval, Provista got our approval last Friday. Great news. Our employers are so excited. Just in terms of the fact that I now have other employers that want to join the Provista Gateway, do I do that via the variation with my district manager, district Kickstart manager?
You do.
Right, okay, brilliant. So that's fantastic. I will do that. I'm really happy about that. My second question, very quickly, is I have approval for employers. I can hear noise somewhere. I have approval for employers that are obviously caught in lockdown.
Yes.
And unfortunately, they can't open, and they're not going to be able to open for some time, I can see. Is the December 2021 deadline date, I can see you pulling a little face there. Do you think that there's any room for manoeuvre on that yet? Because in order to have the 6 months, they've got to have someone in place by July 2021 for it to have completed December 2021, as far as I understand. And I can see that some employers who really wanted to participate are getting worried that they might not be able to.
So, I mean, just to reassure, and a general point of reassurance, I think, Elizabeth and Faye, if you're in this position, you're not going to be in the situation when DWP is going to knock those employers out. So if you have approval for those employers, then if you say to us, look, you know, DWP, that employer is just not ready to load the vacancy for the time being, that is not a problem in any way, shape or form. We're seeing that a lot, frankly. So I guess my message is don't be concerned that kind of people have missed the boat. In terms, it's a very good question, Faye, and as you can imagine, I'm probably not going to answer it. It's something that we are looking at clearly, but it's a debate that is happening above my pay grade, shall we say. But clearly we are looking at it, and you know, we have great aspirations for Kickstart. We want to make the scheme an absolute success. We now are kind of feeling in the position of frustration is a bit the wrong word, but I think we're in the position where we're thinking, oh, actually we've got through the backlog, it's brilliant, we're more or less there, and suddenly we're in a position where we're thinking, actually, how are we going to do this? How can we load the vacancies? So we are discussing it, Faye, but we're nowhere near ready to make an announcement. It wouldn't be a DWP decision anyway. It would be a Treasury decision that would be made, but it is certainly something, as you can imagine, that we're talking about, because like you, we are reflecting on it and thinking, how is this going to work in terms of the life of the scheme? Which doesn't answer your question, I know, Faye, but apologies.
Listen, it's okay, Nick. Thank you ever so much, and we will work with you and your colleagues to make sure this is a success for the people that we all want to support, so, and the employers that we support. So let's just get through it all. We've done that so far, yeah. So well done so far. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Adrian Butcher. Adrian?
taking my mic, putting my mic on again. Yeah, a few questions actually, Nick. Thanks again for all the help, and definitely our account managers being very responsive. A couple of, I know you said there were going to be process changes, but a couple of process questions from my point of view. Firstly, in terms of the actual notification of, you were saying just now that somebody was saying you're prioritizing jobs on the basis of the stated apply by date. We've tried to be realistic, but in doing so, we may even have disadvantaged ourselves. In other words, if we'd say must be applied by the 31st of January, does that put somebody to the head of the queue? That's one. Another one is candidates will be sent through to employers. We've agreed to screen from a number of our employers. Obviously, on that basis, we don't know when the CVs will go through, and obviously then we're reliant on employers. Another one is who do we inform the job start date to, because that triggers the 1,500 payment, and exactly how. And of course, when we get notification of funding relating to individual vacancies, because that will be by individual employers, is there a specific mechanism we expect that to happen from, and whom? Sorry.
That's all right. Let me try and answer the questions in the order that you raised. So let me answer the first one, Adrian, because you made it before, didn't you? Which was the issue about is there a potential for DWP to notify a gateway that they have had that one of their employers has had a start? I think that was your question, wasn't it? Not a start, has had an application. Was that your question?
Yeah. So if they've said yes, we now approve your vacancy, and so your local JCP contact has sent it through to the employer.
Yes. Okay.
Or sent CVs. I'm sorry, to the employer.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. So I mean, the answer is there isn't a mechanism for doing that now. I'll answer the question as directly as I can. I will take it away and I will have a conversation with our digital teams about it. What I will say is that at the moment, our digital teams are very heavily focused on improving the application journey, if that makes sense. So we know that process for applicants is actually quite difficult, and it almost inevitably brings delays because DWP has to come out and ask for questions, additional information. So what we're trying to do is to prioritize work on that application journey, and it is the same team that will be doing that will be doing the other work, if that makes sense. But I will feed it in, Adrian, because I do think it's a good point, to be fair.
Right. Then another one was who do we let? How is the job start date notified? I would think as a gateway we have a responsibility to say this person started on XYZ date. And exactly how do we do that, and who do we tell?
So have you had any starts yet, Adrian?
No, we've had a whole bunch of roles applied, but we haven't yet had any. And they were applied about 3 days before Christmas. We had our gateway about a week before Christmas, I think it is. Okay. And we've therefore sent in about 35 roles, and we're waiting for somebody to say now, yes, those roles are approved, and you'll start to get some CVs or whatever.
Right. Okay. So in terms of the notification for the payment, once we get, so when the process, broadly speaking, is this: the vacancy goes live, DWP referrals to the vacancy, and hopefully applications then come from that, and then employer chooses, a young person starts. When that happens, there is an automated system that should kick in. So basically, Adrian, there'll be a link. So you guys will get some form of a ping from us. I don't know the process in enough detail, but let's put it like this. You don't need to submit some form of ghastly application to us. It is automated and it just pings through. And that, as you then say, starts to trigger that £1,500 payment. But if you haven't had any starts, you wouldn't know that, if that makes sense. But it'll be something automated that happens. I know that sounds vague, but that is genuinely because I think it comes out of our vacancy provision service. I don't believe it's an email, but that is automatic.
Okay. And it seems to us, another question I didn't quite get an understanding of. If you had a part month start date, and somebody's payroll operates on a monthly basis, so let's say ours operates at the end of the month. Yeah. If somebody started on the 16th, and therefore logically speaking, you'd only pay them half a month. Yeah. Is there a particular way in which that would work?
I don't know. It's a very good question.
I think we'll try to get people to start beginning of the month, actually, because from our point of view as well, on a batch basis, it makes more sense.
Yes.
I just didn't know what anybody else is doing.
it would make it easier, to be honest. That's a pretty well. I'm not saying it's absolutely not a it's not a criticism. It's that's too detailed a question. I don't know the answer to that. But Adrian, if it's a problem, I think you've still got my details. If it becomes a real issue for you, let me know. I mean, the payment system from our perspective is more or less automated, so we will make those calculations and pay, I would think. So I don't think from our perspective that's a problem, Adrian. So I think I would say don't disrupt your BAU processes. We have actually, in terms of the maturity of the processes, the payments process is quite mature. So I think we would take that into account. So I think you can kind of carry on as you are, to be honest, Adrian.
Okay, thanks. I'm trying to avoid bugging you too much, Nick.
Yeah,
All right.
well, it's fine. It's
Thank
fine.
you.
No, pleasure. Pleasure.
And on that subject of a start date, if you say must start by XYZ date, listening earlier, it sounded like you were prioritizing vacancies based on the start date. That would encourage people to put an early start date to jump to the front of the queue, and it seems over a while that would be counterproductive.
I agree with that, and just to be clear, you're absolutely right. I did look at those where we were. Sorry, I did say we'd certainly look at those which could be loaded, but it wouldn't just be start date that we'd look at. So we would look at other elements of that as well. And yes, you are right. If people, should we say, do put in early start dates, then that wouldn't be good, because it would then, I guess,
becomes a competition. Yeah,
it would hamstring that system. But the only thing I would then say is that if that obviously did happen, then ultimately that probably wouldn't work too well, because if we then load that vacancy and we say, right, 31st of January, and in fact the employer isn't ready for that vacancy until April or May, for argument's sake, the employer will get referrals. And if we then have to unpick that will ultimately just delay the whole process a lot more for that individual employer. So I'd absolutely encourage people to.
I mean, all of ours, by the way, are immediate. So that's fine.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian.
Okay, can we move on to Daniel Cassidy? Danielle?
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Fabulous, thank you. Yes, thank you, Nick. I've just got a couple of questions, actually, some which you have sort of touched on. Slightly opposite to the lady that spoke just before that gentleman about her employers not being able to take people on at the moment because of lockdown and everything like that. We've got quite a large number of employers who are really keen to take people on. They're maybe in manufacturing or areas that haven't closed, and more than ever they're just as busy, if not busier, and are getting a little bit frustrated with me. I think that they think that it's me that's holding them up. So just to touch on the timescales there, we submitted some vacancy templates on the 16th of December.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know we've had Christmas and everything like that, but we haven't yet heard back whether those vacancy templates are approved or are going live, etc. And I'm just a little bit worried, because without looking right now, I can't remember what closing date that I put on the vacancies. But I'm just worried that maybe you mentioned that you're concentrating on loading the ones that you know are urgent, that are available immediately, but how do you know which ones are? Because as I say, I've got quite a few that I've submitted that I've not heard back from yet, from the 16th of December, and they are available immediately to go live.
It's a great question, and so I mean the reason that we will know is because you tell us that when you fill in the vacancy template, if that matters, if that makes sense. Sorry, but I mean what we're doing at the moment is we are literally triaging all of the vacancies that we have in, and then we will load them in priority order as fast as we can. We've got a team now of more than 100 people who are there to do that piece of work, and whilst we have a number of vacancies outstanding, clearly that kind of breaks down to less vacancy templates, if that makes sense. So it is actually not quite a scary number as it looks, to be honest, Danielle. But we will absolutely get to those as quickly as we can. Our priority has been to try to, and it's a bit like a water pipe, to be honest. We had a massive blockage in the actual applications process, then we had a blockage in the grant agreement process, and now we've moved on to a nice blockage, which is having the vacancies which we need to get onto. So we will crack on with as much pace as we did with the gateways, Danielle, I can assure you.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And sorry, just one other quick one. You mentioned about the variation to the grant agreement, and that they now go to the the local district managers, which is fine. What about the ones that have been submitted? So if I've previously done one, I think I sent in a variation agreement around the same time as the vacancy template, so mid-December. So do I leave that? Is that okay? Will that still get dealt with there, or do I now need to go to my district one? Will that confuse things?
What's your gateway's name, Danielle?
MC personnel.
Oh yeah, no, I think sorry. It's just because it's one whether because I see all the approvers. I wonder whether it was one that I remembered. Not in particular, but no. If you've submitted existing requests to if you have existing requests to vary your grant agreement with DWP at the moment, you do not need to submit those back to your Kickstart district account manager. We will process those centrally. Anything further, if you put those through the Kickstart district account manager, and we will log them for you.
Right. Okay. Lovely. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Danielle.
David Hinton.
Hello, Nick. Hi, thanks for coming back again. Hair's shorter every time. I think, I mean, we've talked a lot about blockages and we've all experienced it. I think what the ones I just want to highlight really is we've had probably about 60 vacancies live with JCP since just before Christmas. Some of those have now closed. On average, we got about half an application per vacancy. Now that's obviously a real concern because Job Centre in theory have been sitting waiting. I know they've had lots to do, but you know, Kickstart is now ready for them, and like us, they should be raring to go. What's being done? What strategies are in place to ensure that, as you know, over the next 2 months, we're going to get thousands of Kickstart jobs if all goes to plan? That's got to improve. So what strategies are in place is my first question. The second one's a little more forensic, really. And I have asked our account manager, but after 3 weeks of her asking everybody, we've not had an answer, and it's quite key. When somebody is submitted to referred by their work coach to a job, an email comes to the gateway or the employer with an application ID reference number. And that's not a number that the young person knows, but it's a number that allows us to claim the funding at the right point. Now, inside that email is also a first name and a last name of that applicant. And the challenge we have is that we're supposed to match up then from a CV or application, the first and last name with the application ID. Now, of course, many people have the same name in this country. Many people use different names on their CVs to their official DWP name. It really doesn't give me confidence that that's a tight process when an employer says we want funding and DWP says, sorry, that's the wrong John Smith. We just need to probably put something more robust in there.
Yeah, it's a good one, and that's why it's really great to have these sorts of conversations, because I think we pick up little things together that we probably would never have thought about that, David. So I suggest that what you should do is, I don't know who your Kickstart district account manager is, but basically what your Kickstart district account manager needs to do is if they drop me a line with that challenge in it, I will make sure that it gets to our digital teams, because that feels like it's probably a digital challenge from our perspective, if that makes sense. It's a very good point, not one genuinely that we considered.
We have a national account manager, so I'll ask her to forward it onto you to forward to the digital team. Great.
Thanks, David. And just in terms of your first point, actually, for once, I do have a nice, clear, good answer for you. Yeah, we are aware of this as well, to be honest. Again, I think it's just a symptom of how quickly we've set the scheme and the systems up, in that we have a fairly set parameter for how that vacancy provision service runs, if that makes sense. So we are aware that we have seen some vacancies, as you say, that perhaps needed to have their end date extended because they didn't get enough time, if that makes sense, or that we perhaps needed to lift the vacancy cap, if that makes sense, or how many would we refer? Because what happens is, you know, we have the conversation about, well, you know, if it's 5 to 1 for argument's sake, but clearly if you get 5 people referred to that vacancy, but it doesn't actually translate into an application, the vacancy will close. So what we're doing about that is it's not absolutely confirmed yet, but we think that in line with, you know, the Kickstart district account manager process that we have, that the best place for that vacancy to be managed is in the local area, if that makes sense. Because then, David, for wherever you are in the country, doesn't matter where you are, but you can then pick up the phone to your account manager and say, look, you know, we need a bit more time with this one. Can we make this one live again because it hasn't quite worked out, if that makes sense? We don't want you to come to the central team to do that because we don't have the resource to do it, and we're also not the best people to have the conversation with, to be honest. So not immediately, but I think over the course of the next, I don't really want to give a time scale because I think there'll be some digital changes, but in the near future, I think it is likely that that process of vacancy management will transfer over to the districts, and that means you can have a much better personal conversation with your district account manager and say, look, this isn't quite working, Chris, can we do it in a different way? So that's basically what we're planning to do there. In essence, then more flexibility to have that managed at local level rather than a bit of a sheep dip national approach, which actually we are picking up isn't working.
Sure. Okay, that's really helpful, and it's all very, very positive. Frustrating at times that we're getting there. I just wanted to, because I think it was Stephanie mentioned earlier about the end date. She just wanted clarification, and in the chat, the last starts at December 21. Yes. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, scheme ends July 22. Last starts December 21. I'm not following the chat, so apologies. I can't speak and follow the chat. I just can't.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Okay, we'll follow the chat for you, Nick. So we've got Simeon Perry next. Hi, Simeon. No, if we can't bring you in, can we move on to Stephanie Bishop, and then can Grace be ready to come in after Stephanie?
Hi again. First of all, I can't see the chat. I think it's probably because I joined after the first 100. So is it possible that that can be shared after the meeting? That would be really helpful. Thank you. So a couple of, I think the main question is, on the last call, Nick, I think you shared that the scheme was going to be opened up to smaller businesses, and I just wondered where we're up to on that, and if that's still the plan or whether that's been approved now. So whether sole traders can now apply, and also if they don't have the 12 months, haven't been established for 12 months or longer.
So I'll answer the second question first, Stephanie. A bit of an easier one. Actually, no, I'll answer the first question first. So actually, yeah, we now have the Gateway Direct model, which I think some colleagues on the call referenced. So there is a gateway provider. I think there is only one at the moment that will, in essence, be able to take on sole traders, is my understanding. So you should, I could probably, what organisation are you, Stephanie, sorry?
People in the Brilliance.
Even though brilliant. Why don't I drop you a line with more details about that, if that makes sense, because they should be on gov.uk, but I'm really conscious when I'm talking about that actually the list on gov.uk probably hasn't been updated for some period of time. So there's no point in me referring you to a list and find that they're not on there. So let me drop you a line about that one. But in terms of your second question, which is probably a bit easier for me to answer because I'm a bit closer to it, Stephanie. The answer is yes, to be honest. So before Christmas, I think when I talked to one of these URSA events, we talked about the processes that we follow when we assess an application, and they broadly fall into two, I guess. So we have due diligence checks, which we undertake on an organisation, which due diligence in essence, and then we assess whether the jobs are additional, and we look at the rapid support. Now, we saw as part of that, as we went through, and also great feedback from URSA and other stakeholders too, that actually we seem to be knocking out what could be a number of very viable businesses because of the bar that we were applying to that assessment process, if that makes sense. Now, clearly, we need the right balance because it's public money, and we want to have, it's our money in essence as taxpayers, so we don't want to be giving that to organisations that will immediately go to the wall. And our nightmare scenario would be that we gave out money, we put a placement in, and then literally after a week that business folds and the young person comes back into the job centre. But we have made changes to that process. So whilst we do still use elements of the Spotlight process, we principally focus now on a particular rating within Spotlight that gives us an indication about the risk of business viability in the short to medium term. So in essence, Stephanie, that's a quick way of saying that if you are less than a year old, if that makes sense, that is now no longer an automatic knockout, if that makes sense. That does not mean that you will pass, but what it does mean is that under the old system of assessment, if you were less than a year old, you were automatically failed. If you were between 1 year and 2 year and you had not submitted accounts, I think that was also an auto fail, or it may have been it might have been a kick out. But in essence, Stephanie, that process is now more flexible. So whilst I think colleagues on the call and wider need to appreciate that is definitely not, he says again, means that if you're less than a year old, you'll definitely get on. What it does mean is there's no automatic bar anymore for employers who fall within that bracket.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks, Stephanie.
Guilty of being on mute. Grace, can you come in next? And then it's Myra and then Emily.
Hi Nick, I think I spoke to you a couple of Kickstart webinars ago from the Inspirational Learning Group, and we've just been approved as a gateway, so we're absolutely thrilled. So thank you very much for that. It was really great to hear. And we've just got a few kind of practical questions that have come up following being told that employers have been approved. So the first one is that we've now got kind of another group of 60 placements ready to apply for Kickstart. How long's that current wait time at the moment once we've been approved as a gateway for future applications?
So just so make sure I understand then Grace, and we did speak before, and it's great to hear we finally got you through the process. I'm really pleased about that. So you've got your grant agreement, you're ready to go, and you want to add more employers, more places, both? What?
More employers and more placements.
More employers, more
so another batch almost.
Fine. So that's the process I was talking about earlier, which is from about next week should be fine. I actually think we're talking to our Kickstart district account managers tomorrow, although Ian will certainly know because he'd be on that call. So I think from next week, Grace, if you get in touch with your Kickstart district account manager, they can talk you through that process. Okay. Now, it's a very fair question to say how long will it take. And I need to give you a very fair answer, which is I don't actually know. And the reason I say that is because the old process that we had, we know took a very long time because everyone had to go back to the beginning of the process and almost start again. So we would have said to you, if you want to add more people, put in another application and it goes to the back of the queue. We have no real way of sifting it because technically a variation should be a little bit more straightforward for us to process in a mainstream application because you've already passed the due diligence checks as a gateway. We will already have assessed your employability support as a wrap, so we should be able to do it faster. So what this new process gives us is the ability to say, we've seen Grace, she's an approved gateway, she's a different position to a fresh application, let's route them to a different team. As I say, the reason I can't tell you how long it's going to take is because we haven't done it yet, to be completely honest. But we've implemented the changes to make sure it's faster. So it should not take the amount of time it's taken so far. If it does, fundamentally, we've wasted our time, to be honest. But it should be a lot faster, Grace. As I say, I genuinely can't give you an answer because we've not done it yet.
That's all right. It's just kind of so we can manage employees' expectations, that's all. But we'll let them know that it should be a quicker process. We've had only a couple of rejected applications for employers. And is there any kind of specific feedback that is available to give those employers, or does it go on their kind of no accounts or?
So if you, in very general terms, well, okay, let me answer the question specifically and then give you general terms. So your Kickstart district account manager will know why an employer has failed. So they will know the status of the application because they have access to our central workbooks. But in very general terms, if you as a gateway have been approved and an employer within your application has not been, 9 times out of 10, that's because they will have failed the due diligence checks.
Okay.
However, Grace, it's worth bearing in mind that it might be worth having a chat with the district account manager because if they were assessed under the old process, it is possible now that if they go through the new process, they could pass. But in general, because, to be honest, because of the way the application is structured, if an employer fails, they failed due diligence as opposed to we're not sure those jobs are truly additional, if that makes sense, because we put a lot of the assessment at the gateway, if that makes sense. And of course, we look at the additionality and employability from the employers beneath, but in the main, it will be a due diligence fail, I would suspect.
Fab, thank you very much. And just my third and final question is just regarding permitted spend that's on the grant agreement that we're sending out to employers. And I was wondering if there's any clarity on what can be included in permitted spend. For example, things like food hygiene courses, DBS checks, can they be included in that, or is that a separate cost to the employers?
I don't know. It's a simple answer to that question. Again, your best bet, have a chat with the district account manager. If your district account manager doesn't know or can't tell you, then if they fire that into the central team, we'll get one of our policy people to look at it. If it's not in the grant agreement, and from what you're saying, it doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Nick, just before we move on to Myra, I'm just picking up some things in the chat sidebar about sole traders. So people are asking for, I've got terrible rain here. I don't know if you can hear me. People are asking about sole traders, and I just wondered whether it was worth you explaining about sole traders being part of a gateway application, just to clarify where we're up to with that.
Right, so I think what I'm going to need to do, Elizabeth, is I do think I want to take that one away, if that's okay.
Okay.
Because I'll be totally honest and say that over the course of the last couple of weeks, as you can imagine, I've been almost solely focused on getting through the backlog, getting grant agreements out, all of this sort of stuff. So I haven't paid enough attention to that space as I should, to be honest. So I'd rather not do what I did on the first URSA forum, which is give colleagues incorrect information, because I know that was a bit frustrating. So is that okay, Elizabeth? I don't want to speculate and get the information. Let me take it away, and what we'll do is we'll follow it up after, and I'll just confirm exactly what that looks like, and then Stephanie, you'll receive that as well, because I don't want to speculate if I'm giving the wrong information, to be honest.
Okay, that's much appreciated. Myra, and then Emily, please.
Hi, good morning, Nick. Happy New Year.
You too. Last time, I remember you weren't getting on well, I don't think.
No, we weren't, but just good news, like so many organizations, we got our gateway approval just before Christmas, and then last week we got our grant offer letter, so that is fantastic news. So it's just to be honest, it's a few questions relating to that as well that I have. So we obviously have received that. We're in the process of getting that signed off by our staff, chief exec, etc. But kind of linked around that for me was the actual employer offer letters. Do we need to actually get wet signatures for those, or can we have electronic signatures? I suppose linked to that as well, because obviously we have, well, not obviously, but we have a return date of the beginning of February, a deadline for the beginning of February in terms of returning our grant offer letter. So it's whether or not all of that needs to then be returned, so including the employers, because obviously for us the timescale that would just be a nightmare, because we've got 4 applications bunched into that one grant offer letter, so it's a huge number of employers we're dealing with.
Yeah, okay, so don't know the answer to your first question. I suspect you probably don't need a wet signature. Again, have a chat with your district account manager. If they don't know the answer, have you asked them?
Well, this is my next question. Because we are acting as a national gateway for employer organisations across Scotland, do we need to deal with all 30 or all, what is it, 6 districts for ours, or would there be one national?
That's helpful. That is at least one question I can answer, Maura. What is your organisation's name, Maura? Remind me.
It's SCVO, the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations.
I remember you. I think I do remember your application. Okay, so in a good way. So the answer is no, you don't, because that would be totally bonkers, frankly, because you spend your life speaking to 34 or 37 different people, frankly. So what we will do, Moira, is we have a small team of central people, well, they're not central people. We have a small team of people within my central team who are our kind of new business account managers, and they act as conduits for national gateways, because it just doesn't make sense for you guys to be, frankly, wasting your time. So what I'll do, Maura, is I will put one of them in touch with you, and they, basically I'll tell them what the question is, but I will put them in touch with you, and they should be your contact point. I know they're not in the district, but they will be your DWP contact point to help you. In terms of your other question, you have got, we would have said to you, look, we need the grant agreement back by February, because I think we give a standard month's notice, and then we send you a chance after 7, 14 and 21 days. But let's be clear, given that, he says, smiling a little bit wryly, we didn't process your application quite as fast as we would want to, it might be a bit churlish of DWP to say, if you haven't sent it back from the 1st of February, that's it, you're gone. So don't be overly concerned about that, Maura. Obviously, we all want to get through things as quickly as we can, but if you think you're going to struggle getting your grant agreement back to us by that deadline, have a chat with the account manager that I'll put you back in with. It's not the end of the world. We just need to know if that makes sense. We would rarely automatically close a grant that we'd issued. I think the only time we would do that is if we just hadn't heard from people and we just didn't know what was going on. There has to be a cut-off. But if you're concerned by February, don't be. We can sort that for you.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I suppose, to be honest, then that just leaves me, as soon as I get that assigned account manager, the other questions that are running through my head will very much be answered, so I don't have an issue there. The only one I was going to bring up was, it was actually in the chat there, was that somebody had mentioned about the national minimum wage change come the beginning of next year. Does the funding take that into account, the increase, so that obviously for any starts through the year? Yeah, fantastic. Right, that's fantastic news.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Great to hear you finally with us, Maura. That is really good.
We're so happy as well. Thank
Oh,
you.
fantastic.
So I can see a lot of people with their hands raised, because this question to Nick is extremely valuable. I'm worried that we're going to run out of time before we get to the conversation about employers. So what I'm going to suggest is we take a few more questions. We have the employers sharing good practice, and then if we can, we come back to you, Nick, if we have time before the end. So if we took, this is in the order that I see them, so if we took Emily, Masood, Simeon, and I've got 2 Traces, and then so that's Tracy Scott Milner and Tracy at Transform Lives. Then we'll just have the conversation about employers, give Nick a little bit of a break, and then perhaps pick up the remaining questions. Is that okay? So if we go to Emily and Masood, and then Masood, and then the 2 Traces, and if everybody's ready to unmute so that we don't get delays and we make best use of the time. So over to Emily, please.
Hi, Nick. Can you hear me? Just to check.
Hiya.
Thank you so much for your update as well. I'm calling from Steps to Work, and we were approved Gateway just before Christmas, and we've received our grant agreement and vacancy template, which is brilliant, so thank you very much. I just have 2 questions. My first one is just to clarify, on the grant agreement, it does say that the end date is the 31st, December the 31st, 2021 for placements. Is this correct? And then we can enrol people in December and they will finish in June 2022?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. And then my second question is, I'm not sure if this has been covered before, I have checked the FAQs and I couldn't see anything, but if the young person withdraws from the scheme within the first week to 5 weeks, what happens with the 1,500?
That's a very good question, Emily. And the answer is, and I think we did talk about it on one of the earlier calls, Elizabeth, if I remember rightly, probably weren't on, Emily. There is no kind of clawback, if that makes sense. So if the young person, so in essence, Emily, if we see that, we will speak to you, to be honest. So we will pick it up. So I did mention earlier that actually our systems around payment are probably some of the more mature within Kickstart. So if we know that a young person drops out quickly, we will speak to you as a gateway or as an employer, it doesn't really matter who, if that makes sense, to talk about what that looks like and why that happened, if that makes sense. We have had that happen, to be honest. We've had some situations where, for very legitimate reasons, it just hasn't quite worked out, if that makes sense. We'd obviously want to have a conversation about the fact that the £1,500 is there for employability support. And so if the young person has left after a week, quite what have you done, if that makes sense. But that would be an adult conversation. And just to be clear, Emily, if you then if you then have another young person start, then technically another £1,500 is payable, if that makes sense. So this does become a conversation. There's no auto clawback. It becomes a conversation between DWP and you. What I would say, and you would expect me to say this, and we have had it, but thankfully on literally numbers of one hand, to be honest, we have had this happen with one particular, a couple of organisations on a regular basis, and we have had a conversation, stepped in and said, right, no, thank you very much. But in the main, it becomes a conversation between us, Emily.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Nick.
Pleasure. Thanks, Emily.
Okay, so we've got Masood ready.
Hello, yes, thank you, Nick. You've been absolutely brilliant with the information you've provided. You actually answered one of my 2 questions. If I may just touch on one then, it's what's the capacity level, national level in the programme itself left? So how many more Kickstart gateways are you looking for? How many more job placements can you handle? If I may, how long would a gateway application take now from start to approval?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to quote an absolute number, Masood, and that's not because I want to be evasive, but it literally is that because of everything that is happening in the world at the moment, and I can't remember the might have been Stephanie who asked me the question earlier about would the scheme be extended, what are we thinking about? I think at the moment we're just mulling all of those questions over, to be honest, Masood, in terms of capacity and what are we doing. But to answer your second question more directly, new applications should now be being processed in the main within the timescales that are sitting on gov.uk, to be honest. So if people are waiting longer than that, then it probably is worth having a conversation with your Kickstart district account manager. What I would say is that there are different approval processes depending on the size of an application. So if an application is relatively modest, it comes to a lowly individual like me, to be honest, and I can approve it. If it goes over particular levels, it then has to go upwards within DWP. Occasionally, depending on the level of the vacancy, it has to go to our permanent secretary for approval, and that process will then take longer. And I think we have to remember that within some of the processes that we operate, there are, and this is not a reflection on DWP or on applicants, but there are almost inevitable inbuilt delays, to be honest, that we have to come back out and ask for information. But what I will say, Masood, is you should not be in a position, and Elizabeth, I think this was something that came up on our first URSA call, or possibly our second, where I really felt the frustration from colleagues who had put an application in and had just heard nothing. Total radio silence. And from our perspective, that was at the time unacceptable and remains unacceptable now. So Masood, you shouldn't be left in the dark, but in the main, applications are now being processed within the timelines on gov.uk.
Great, thank you so much. And if I may touch on the Kickstart, because you did touch on, you've changed the criteria for minimum of 1 year accounts.
Yes.
And startups can be younger, and I think that's brilliant. If a company has longevity, can pass the risk criteria and has great jobs, and it should be considered. On that front, from a gateway perspective, is there a minimal hurdle that a gateway provider has to meet? Do they have to be around a year as well, and a year's worth of accounts?
It's the same. It's a great question, Masood. It's the same process that we follow. So it's reflective of the fact that Kickstart is a work placement scheme, and the funding is for a short period of time and not 5 or 10 years, if that makes sense. So I should have been clear, actually, Masood. It is a great question. If you are a gateway, we assess you differently now, but we assess you against the same criteria that we now assess employers, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you so much. Brilliant.
Pleasure, Masood.
Okay, so if we can have Tracy Scott Milner and then Tracy Fishwick, and then we'll just have the employers section, and then we will come back to Nick if we've got time at the end. So Tracy Scott Milner, please.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Hi, Nick. Just a really quick question. I'm calling from Kirklees Council. Just on the find a gateway provider, we seem to be having a problem with the gov.uk system, in that if one of our employers in our locality puts their postcode in to try and find a Kickstart gateway organisation to support them, it doesn't bring up our council. But if you put it in county, it does. So I just wondered, is there an issue, a problem with that system at the moment?
So there's a couple of things going on with that system, to be honest, Tracy. And one of your colleagues might have emailed me. You don't work with someone called Matthew. Do you work with someone called Matthew?
I do. Yes.
Matthew emailed me, so you save me emailing him back. I mean, there's a couple of problems with that with that list in totality, to be honest. So our digital teams are looking at it, Tracy. The big problem that we have with that is that colleagues will remember at the very beginning of Kickstart, and this predates me, so I might ask for a bit of a get out of jail free card if I do give a bit of bum information, but hopefully not, is that in the early days of Kickstart, we had the EOI process whereby gateways could apply if they were interested, but they did not apply with their employers, if that makes sense. And so we spotlight checked those gateways. They went on the gov.uk list, and that then meant that smaller employers could then approach gateways, because the messaging, if we're being honest, was a bit confusing at first, because we'd said to small employers, well, you can go via a gateway, and then they said, well, where are the gateways? That makes sense. So we know that that list on gov.uk is out of date, because there are some gateway organisations there who, for whatever reason, didn't finally apply, if that makes sense. So you could have employers chasing those gateways, but actually the gateway will say, well, no, we're not taking new applications at the moment, if that makes sense. So we are in the process over the course of the next month or so, hopefully my digital colleagues wouldn't shoot me if they heard, of trying to get that list updated. And so you should see some changes there, Tracy. What I will say is that in terms of the search criteria, that is a little bit more complex. And as we said, it's not that it's not important, but what we want to try to do is obviously prioritise our digital work, as you would, in your organisation as well, to those areas that we think are higher priority. And at the moment, what we do really want to do is to make the application process as easy as it possibly can be for organisations to give us the information we need, so we don't have to keep continually coming back out to you and saying, oh, well, we know you said this, but can you give us this now? Can you fill in this Excel spreadsheet, if that makes sense? So we want that slicker, and then we will move down the line, but we are aware it's a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, so we've had a message from Tracy Fish, which she'll hold her question now so that we can actually have the conversation about employers. If you're staying with us, Nick, all these people who've got their hands raised, I know will be desperate to still ask you their questions. We'll give you a little rest for a minute and then we'll try and pick them up at the end. So we had, in theory, split the agenda into gateways and employers. And we wanted to give those of you that are employers the opportunity to share your success, to just tell us where you're up to, but just to highlight some of those outstanding issues as well. So I'm very keen to kind of open this up to you. I know some of you have been in the chat bar. I have to multitask by looking at the chat on my phone and the participants with hand raised on the computer. So apologies if I've missed anything. But have we got anybody who wants to share where they're up to with their successes as an employer? And then perhaps we can also talk a little bit about how we're getting around restrictions with the lockdowns, etc. Does anybody want to come in? And I'd say at this time, because we've got the legacy hands ready for asking questions to Nick, if you're an employer and you want to speak now, do you want to just open your microphone and your camera and just join us? Yes, no. Have employers, I'm telling Nick I'll give him a rest, but have employers got questions for Nick? Do we want to do some of that instead now?
Elizabeth, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, Claire McMenamin from Catalyst Housing. I just wanted to say, just as a very quick good news story, that we applied for 30 placements on the 14th of December, and we heard last week that we'd been approved. So what Nick says about the process is unclogging itself seems to be working out really well. We are just very much at the early stages of our project on this. We've got 1,001 questions which we think of at different times. So I think what I'm going to do is use the district Kickstart account person who's been in touch now by email as my initial sort of forum. I was thinking of going to, some of our friendly local job centres just to ask how the process is working, any tips. I don't know whether that's perhaps inadvisable if they're super busy, but we're just thinking about when do we start our placements, because we're doing it in 3 waves over the year. And obviously the later we start the first group, the more they're going to crash into each other. So ultimately, if there is a government decision at some point about flexing the final date that you can take on Kickstarters beyond December 21, obviously that would be, that would help, rather than us having too many overlapping cohorts. That's my only observation, really. Okay. And that's it. I'll step away.
Thank you very much, Claire. We've had a question in the chat about, are there any single employers at this meeting that have been approved for the scheme? So I'm assuming this means like a standalone employer that's got a significant number of vacancies. If you are one of those, do you want to just open up your microphone and the camera and join us? If we haven't at this meeting, I could arrange to invite somebody to come to the next meeting and speak about that experience. So, and that might be one of the larger employers, but we could definitely bring them in.
Hi.
Hi.
Elizabeth, can you hear me? Susie from Susie from Sodexo.
Hiya.
Hiya. So we are obviously a large employer. And we put our bid in for our first 30.
which it went really smoothly, which is great to hear. We've got our grant letter, we've signed it, we've sent it back. We've done all our templates, they've all gone through to DWP and Job Centre Plus, and we're now starting to get referrals. So we're quite far ahead within the process. We've got everything ready, all our employabilities, we're doing it all ourselves in-house. So far, most of the ones that we've put through at the moment, the templates are for our Sodexo Justice service, so a lot of our prisons, to support obviously the work that they're doing in there. So it's kind of, we wanted to do it early because obviously they've got to go through the process and obviously be checked and all that kind of stuff. But so far, it's working really well. My only thing is that I would like to, I've got my direct contact from DWP, who's fantastic, but I would like to maybe know a little bit more from the guys on Job Centre Plus, just to find out what's happening and referrals are okay and the templates are okay. So it's just that little bit of lack of communication from that side, which, you know, I keep getting asked for feedback from our directors, but I can only give the feedback that I'm getting from Elaine, my DWP contact, really. But otherwise, it's going really well as a standalone employer. So thank you.
Excellent. So yeah, I do think that at the next meeting, perhaps early on in the agenda, we'll have that sort of standalone employer and get one or two organisations who fall into that category to give us their experience and good news. Is there anything else on the employer side before we go back to our questions for Nick? No? Okay, so shall we go back to...
I have an employer question.
Oh, quick. Yes, please.
Can you hear me?
Hello. Yes.
Okay, so my name's Aidan Doyle. I'm the CEO of Bellwether Capital Management. As the name suggests, we're a financial services company in the city. So we dropped an application on November the 25th, and Stephanie should be given a knighthood for facilitating and arranging this dialogue because, to quote Nick, we've had very much radio silence since then. Now, we understand that, you know, the situation globally being what it is, that there are reasons for this, but we want to understand if there's anything we should be doing or can be doing in the meantime to get the status of our application, because in our particular industry, it's very complex to onboard a lot of people in our sales vertical because we're regulated, etc., etc. So we're asking, at our point in the process, do we have a district account manager, or are they assigned on approval of the application? And B, if we have one, how do we keep up with our application, and how do we move forward, you know, in a more transparent fashion?
So it's a great question. So sorry, did you say you'd applied on the 25th of November as an employer?
Yes, as a standalone direct employer.
And just, sorry, remind me again, I do apologise, it's always a bit difficult on Teams. What's the employer name?
We're Bellwether Capital Management Limited. We're a London-based financial service company.
Bellwether. Okay, it's not, and the reason I always ask is not because I'm trying to catch people out, but because I see that it's on the odd occasion.
It might have rang a bell, right?
Yeah, okay. Exactly. It doesn't actually.
Okay.
So, which doesn't help. But what I would suggest you do, well, answer your second question is that normally district account managers are kind of assigned on success, if that makes sense. Okay. But to be honest, they should be there to help in all situations. And I hope we wouldn't be as inflexible as saying, you know, someone that contacts us, well, if you know, we can't talk to you unless you've been approved, because your question is about why you haven't been approved. So what I will say is, if you applied on the 25th of November, there's a problem. And that doesn't mean there's a problem with your application. It means there's a problem with us because we must have missed you, quite frankly. So what I suggest that you do is have a chat with your district account manager.
Where
are you based?
I'm in London. What we did was this: since our application was submitted online, we simply over at one or two stages, we sent an inquiry email to the generic email addresses on one of the Gov sites. In other words, national, and then London and South East. I think that's all we did.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to give you someone's name, because if he's not your district account manager, we'll certainly know who is. So chap in London called Brian McEwen, and that's McKewoen, I'm sure. I'm sure that's right. But Brian's one of our partnership managers in London, and I'm sure Brian can have a look into it for you. But just to reassure you, that is not, well, I'm not sure if this helps at all in any way, shape or form. That is not a processing delay. That is an error. You should have heard from us by now.
Great. So before I go, how do I locate Brian exactly?
So he will be, his email address will be brian.mcewen@dwp.gov.uk.
Brian.mcewen, M-C-K-E-W-E-O-E-N or E-O-N? I'm sorry, dude.
It's fine. It doesn't matter. Just hang on a minute.
Thank you.
Just hang on. Sorry, because there's no point in me giving you an email address that doesn't work.
Hi, I'll just put it in the chat for you.
Yeah, all right, put it in the chat. That'll be fine, as long as I can access it. I appreciate your help,
right.
and well done, Stephanie.
All right, thank you. Can we go over to the order I see them now are Joe, then Julie, then Peter, please.
Hello, I'm Jo Baird and I'm working for the Bristow Partnership. I'm the new project manager for Kickstart. My question, first of all, is we have a company that has been approved that is currently going through a change of ownership. They've notified us of the change and I wanted to know what we now need to do about that.
I don't think you need to do anything, Joe. So they are, if they've been if they're an employer that's been approved underneath your gateway application, we wouldn't necessarily be looking at ownership of the organisation because the due diligence checks, as I say, focus on the financial viability. So if the business is being sold, I don't think you need to tell us about that. You can go ahead.
Oh, fantastic. And secondly, just to clarify, will we as a gateway be notified when vacancies go live, or do we have to wait until the employers start letting us know that they're getting notifications?
I think that was Adrian's question earlier, Joe, but you might not have been with us at that time. So my understanding is the employers get notified. I don't believe you as the gateway necessarily. No. Do you know what? I'm not going to speculate. I'm going to find out. And Elizabeth, I'm going to just confirm that point because I'm conscious, as I'm saying, Joe, I'm not sure I'm necessarily sure myself. So I'll have to take that one away if that's okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Okay, thank you. We've got Gavin Hoole and then Peter, then Daniel.
Hello, Nick. How you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good to see you again. Again, my questions as an academic are around neurodiversity. So I've lined up a few here. I'll shoot them off and see how you can answer them briefly. So what emphasis are you placing on neurodiversity in inclusion in the gateway process and vacancy processes? And, how is the developmental pathway being emphasized in that space? And also, how aware of this gateway and neurodiversity inclusion are managers in the developmental pathway, and how are neurodiverse people being targeted in this space?
Good. Well, I'll answer the question. I mean, you asked a couple of specific questions there, Gavin, and to be honest, I think some of that's probably out of my level of expertise. But what I will say is the reason that we have the work coach at the heart of the customer journey here is that within Universal Credit, as you probably know, the model is one where the customer, when they come into the job centre, are assigned a work coach, and that work coach is supposed to stay with them, if that makes sense, during all of their time with DWP. So in essence, then, we would expect that work coach to have had a good understanding of what, it doesn't have to be a young person, it could be any person, I guess, any particular barriers that the young person might have, any particular reasonable adjustments that they might expect an employer to make, and they would be taking that into account when they were considering what would be the best option for the young person. And the reason that I say that is we are all here obviously talking about Kickstart, but that may not be necessarily the most appropriate support mechanism for some people that come into our job centre. I'm not saying that would necessarily be people with particular issues, but there are many other ways that the job centre can help people apart from Kickstart. So Gavin, it's mainly been taken into account within those conversations between the work coach and the young person.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the responsible gateway programs, the gateway individuals, and then that kind of thing, I suppose that's onboarded through the job centre itself. There's just a conscious awareness of how often individuals who are neurodiverse are excluded in this process, and just the awareness of that being emphasised through the process, and this is highlighted in my research as well.
Right.
So
Thanks,
thank you for your efforts there.
My pleasure, Gavin. My pleasure. Always happy to chat.
Okay, can we have Peter, then Daniel, then Arit, and then we're getting really close to the end. So can we try and be quick? Thank you.
Hi, Nick. I'll keep it short. Just a quick question around, you mentioned earlier on, and I'm aware of the Gateway Direct model, and I have been in touch with Anne Kennedy about that, but not heard anything since then. And I just wondered where we are in regards to timelines, because obviously as East Midlands Chamber, we are keen to support those sole trading organisations, and obviously keen to take and be a Gateway Direct gateway organisation as well. And then secondly, just for Elizabeth, I'm unable to see the chat, so I'm not sure if you need to put a setting for me on there. That would be great. Thank you.
The answer, Peter, is probably the same answer that I think I gave earlier. I just don't feel I've got enough information on that to give you a great answer. So what I'll do is we'll do you a written update, Elizabeth and Ursa colleagues, just on where we are with that Gateway Direct model, because that is being developed. Well, you know Anne very well, obviously, Peter. Being developed by our policy colleagues. It's not something that I'm directly involved in, but I can certainly find some notes, if that's okay. Sorry.
Yeah, brilliant. No, that's fantastic. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, I will just quickly say, I think the chat is a Microsoft Teams issue. It seems that when we have a large meeting, after we get to about 94 people, some people can't see the chat. However, at some point in the near future, we will be using our own platform called Ursa Live, and hopefully that will get round this issue. Anyway, sorry for colleagues who can't see that today. We are recording and copying the chat, so hopefully we can get that out to everybody afterwards. So we have 3 more questions for Nick. 3 more people, maybe 4 here. So if we can go Arit, Nabila, Sarah, and then Daniel, and then that's it. Okay, so Arit.
Yeah, hey Nick, lovely to see you, and thank you for being so responsive over email. It's just a couple of things, maybe points of clarification. So with the district account manager, I haven't heard from my district account manager, but I heard an employer say earlier that they had heard from theirs. Is it for me to reach out to them and try and find them, or should they be in contact with me now that I have the grant offer letter?
So it'll probably be a mixed bag, to be honest, Arit. I mean, in the main, the Kickstart district account manager will know that you've been approved, but they might only probably. We have a mixed model around the place, if I'm being honest, Arit. I would, if I were you, I'd probably just reach out, because I think probably, although we've got those people in place, they will probably all be working in slightly different ways. So I would, particularly given the size of your bid, because it was quite big, if I remember.
Yeah, it is.
I would reach out.
Right, so that's the job centre still trying to get. So it's like literally our local job centre that I'm speaking. That
so, Arit, are you a national gateway, Arit, or are you?
No, we're London based.
You're London based.
I don't. Yeah, should it be like our local job centre in Newham, because we're based in Newham, although we work pan London.
Yeah, it would be your local Kickstart district account manager will be based in Newham, London Borough.
Right. Okay, and when it comes to that recruitment piece, and forgive me if you've already addressed this, that even though our organisation is based in Newham, I'm guessing that the jobs will go out pan London, right? Or vacancies will be marketed pan London.
It depends what you ask us to do, Arit, but if you ask us to do that, we will.
Right, okay. And my final thing is the contracting. I heard a lady talking a little bit earlier about the employer offer letter. When I read the contract that I got, or the offer letter that I got, you were looking for the signed offer letter, not you personally, but DWP want the signed offer letter along with the vacancy templates returned, right? But it's not the employer agreement as well. That's at a later date if you need it. Is that correct? Or do you want that too?
I don't know.
Right.
Have a chat with
the contract does say at a later date, but I just heard somebody mention it earlier, so I didn't know whether I had misread the details.
I don't think you did, Arit. I think that was about whether it needed to be a wet signature on the letter, if I remember right. I think that was Moira from SCVO.
All right, okay. And just one last thing is where this variation, we've had a couple of companies just because of the time it's taken to get their applications approved, where their jobs have changed slightly. Yep. Is it okay? They can still submit their vacancy templates, right? Even though they're different jobs that were in the first bid, or do we have to do that variation thing for that?
So are they completely different? Can you give me?
No, they're just little changes. They're not hugely different, but their job titles are different.
I mean, my advice would be to put them in before we load a vacancy. We check if that makes sense. So if there's anything manifestly wrong, so if we would look at that and think, hang on a minute, we didn't approve that job, we will come to you and say, hang on, what is this? This could be a problem. But I think unless you hear from us, you should just assume the vacancies will be uploaded. So I would crack on and just submit them.
Right. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay. Thank you. Have we got Nabila, then Sarah, then Daniel, and then that's the end.
Hi, thanks ERSA for organising this and keeping the forum open as well afterwards. Really informative, thank you. Hi Nick, just a very quick question for you. I'm from Living Well Consortium based in the West Midlands. We did apply early on in the scheme. We are financially sound and we've got accounts and we've got a structure in place to support PAYE and everything else. And we did unfortunately get rejected in the first process. And I did manage to get in touch with our regional coordinator to ask for some more feedback. And they did at the time tell us that it was, Spotlight was used and stuff. But we couldn't understand how we've been rejected. And we are keen to put in another application and try to get past Spotlight. And we just wanted to know how that is going to be possible, because we've got all the other stuff that is asked on the application form. After that bit about accounts, it's about the additional information, and we want to make sure that we've got that covered in there about how we can support PAYE, what position we're in to do that, and how we're looking to run as a consortium, but be a single employer. But I just wanted to understand if it has actually changed. I mean, I know that you mentioned earlier that Spotlight is more of a light touch now, but is it still going to create the same hurdles for people who have still got the same company number and the same accounts up and everything else?
No. So I mean, it is a bit hard for me to describe it, and I'm really conscious I don't want to give people sort of higher expectations than possible. So we used to assess using the entirety of the Spotlight mechanism, which was a very high bar, given that this is a time-lapse scheme, if that makes sense. We changed our assessment processes midway through December. And what that means is, although we still run the full Spotlight check against an organisation, we place a particular emphasis on one element of it, which is the likelihood of the business failing in the short to medium term. Now, provided that indicator is not red, then the business will pass. So my advice would be, Nabila, I would put another application in. It's not a guarantee it will happen, because you could still fail against that indicator. But let's put it like this: the bar is now at a different level. It's not at a level where we think we've introduced unnecessary risk into the system, but it is at a different level. So my advice would be to put another application in.
Okay, thank you, Nick. I have also got a lot of other questions, but I'm presuming that at some point after this meeting they may get answered. If you ever get round to having time to answer questions. Thank you very much, guys. I'm going to disappear to another meeting now, so thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for your contributions in the chat, Nabila. So yeah, we've got Sarah and then Daniel.
Yeah, hi Nick. Thanks for your time. Just a couple of quick questions. We've put an we are about to put an application in as a gateway organisation, a local authority gateway organisation. However, at the back end of last year, an application was put in error. We've asked for that application to be recalled, but it has been issued with a sort of Kickstart reference number. I've spoke to our regional account manager, and I'm waiting to hear back. We're just sort of itching to get this next application in. And appreciate you said earlier about a gateway having more than one application in. Do we need to wait to hear sort of confirmation that that earlier application's been successfully recalled, or should I just put the next application in?
Put it in, Sarah. Put it in.
Right. Okay. And one final question, and I know you've kind of said you don't want to give incorrect information and you're going to update everybody around sole traders, but I've got a number of sole traders and a partnership organisation who I believe come under the same sort of, they don't have a company's house number. Should I include them at this stage in our application, or is it better to hang fire given what you're going to update us on?
They don't have so they're not incorporated, Sarah.
No.
No, then don't put them in for the time being.
Right. Okay. That's brilliant. Thanks very much for your time.
All right. Pleasure.
Okay, so final questions from Daniel.
Hello. Hello, thanks for everyone's time and input on this. I've got, although the last one dreaded double question, I'm sorry. We're a very small gateway, certainly compared to some of the other sizes I've heard mentioned during this call, mainly focused on the voluntary sector. And I've got a couple of questions that relate to that. We're very much an employability type organisation, and maybe it relates a little bit to what Emily was asking earlier. We are very focused just by our nature on what will happen to the Kickstart employees when their 6 months come to an end, and focused on essentially getting them jobs, long-term jobs. But obviously the timings of that can't always be perfect. So what happens when someone, say, wants to start a new job, say 3 or 4 months into their Kickstart employment? Is there, because you can't always, so is that, I presume that would be a good thing, but how is it managed in terms of the programme and the funding and say the 1,500 quid?
Yeah, that's a great question, Daniel. And to be honest, the answer to that's probably a bit simpler than I think the answer I gave Emily, which is possibly a bit more opaque. In that scenario, if someone gets a job after 3 months and they leave the Kickstart placement and take up full-time work, fantastic. That's what we want, right? So DWP would cease paying the salary, if that makes sense. There wouldn't be a situation where we would take the £1,500 back. And then if you then onboarded somebody else, if that makes sense, then you would get another 1,500.
Okay, that's thank you for that. And then the other question some of our employers, voluntary sector type employers, have asked is if they are already in contact with somebody, or they're aware of someone, or they find someone who would be relevant to their vacancy, and they're eligible in receipt of universal credit under 25. Is there a process for allowing them to apply, for example, via their work coach or whatever?
Yes, yeah, that's fine. So if and I think it's something. Would we would we welcome it? It's not that we wouldn't not welcome it, to be honest. But I think from our perspective, if someone knocks on the door of an employer and says, look, are you Kickstart? Can I come and work for you? And all those things happen, then absolutely they need to come back through their UC work coach. What I will say, and it's just an important point of clarity, is that access to Kickstart, no pun intended, but the Universal Credit Work Coach is the gateway, if that makes sense. So it could be entirely possible that an employer could say, yeah, absolutely, go and speak to your work coach. We look forward to welcoming you. And when the work coach actually has a proper conversation with that young person, it turns out that opportunity might not be the right one for them. So it would not be an automatic, well, if the employer spotted someone and referred them to the work coach, that does not necessarily mean that that young person will be referred to the vacancy. But there's no problem with doing it, if that makes sense.
And do we get to interact with the work coaches in any way? So sort of if we have to explain the vacancy in more details to the organisation? So either we as the gateway or the prospective employer.
So you could do that via your Kickstart district account manager. So your district account manager could help you with that. So if there was a particular facet of the job or organisation that you felt was very relevant to a group or individuals, if that makes sense, you could have that conversation with the district account manager. Fine, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. Really helpful.
Pleasure.
Okay, cheers.
Okay, so thank you again, Nick. It's really valuable, and I would like to think that it cuts down on time at the DWP, because people share these issues, these questions, and your inbox is reduced by your contributions to Ursula, I would like to believe. Anyway, but I do want to thank you, because it's really, really beneficial to to the Kickstart community to have you with us at these meetings. So we've overrun slightly, but it's very heartening to see that how many people stay on till the end. I think that shows the value of everybody's contributions. So thanks for all joining us this morning. Yes, of course, thanks particularly to Nick, but to people who've contributed and who've shared. We will send out some requests for people to speak at the next forum, because I think we're moving on and we need to look at what's actually happening now on the ground in the workplaces and in the community. So thanks everybody. We hope to see you soon. watch out for a date, because Ursa will be having a youth employment conference soon, which will cover Kickstart, and we'd love to have you all there. Okay, thank you very much.